So as you know, Tunheim helps organizations be understood. What does being understood mean to you? All this stuff we're talking about, what do you think? What does that mean to you?
Well, being understood is actually a shorthand version of saying, what do you want people to know about you that's important? Mm-hmm. And I think for every organization, for every individual, for every entrepreneur, for every thought leader, that's going to be a different answer. And it's important to have companies like Tunheim that can help suss that out, because sometimes people don't even know what that is until you make it very explicit to them. You know, someone might say, oh, we're in the business of selling windows. Well, actually, no. What you're in the business of doing is creating, you know, a friendly home environment that's conducive to living a better life. That's what you're in the business of. You happen to be producing windows, but what you're really doing is selling a type of lifestyle. You're selling opportunities to be with friends and family in a loving environment, for example.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, helping these companies understand what their true business is, what are their true objectives, and who they need to reach with that message is actually the core of what Tunheim does.
Mm-hmm. What makes that hard today?
It's hard because, you know, there's just like anyone else, there's just so much information out there. There's just so many things happening. Getting people to focus on something that's not front and center. It's not the crisis of the day, usually, unless you have a sort of existential sort of, you know, crisis, or there's something happening that needs to be addressed immediately. It's usually something that's put on the back burner. It's like nice to have. Yeah. It's the same type of thing I think that plagues, you know, marketers always complain that it's hard to measure ROI. And the same thing goes with communications. How do you measure something that's, you know, essentially intangible?
Yeah. And in everything that you do, right? Not every communication is.
The other thing I would say too is also making people understand that communications is not the same as PR. Yeah. Public relations is one thing, and that's obviously dealing vis-a-vis managing the media and your relationships with the media. But a lot of people think, when they think of communications, they think of public relations. And I tell people those two things are related, but PR is actually sort of just it's not necessarily a small component, but it's just a wing of the house of the communications
part
house.
Of the ecosystem. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of companies and a lot of entrepreneurs, they say my goal is to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Yes.
Or the New York Times. And I always
I know them, you hear that a lot.
Or Newsweek or whatever. And I say, you know what? You don't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, because if you are at the stage that you're in right now, that means that you had a major crisis.
Yeah.
There's something bad happening. That's the only reason that a company comes out of nowhere and lands on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. The way it works 99 times out of 100 is there's building blocks. Mm-hmm. First, you get known in your local papers or in your trades, and then you move up to sort of third, second tier. And then after a while, you've kind of built this archipelago of different pieces that are maybe going to attract the interest of a major writer from the New York Times or from, you know, a Business Week, a Bloomberg Business Week, or whatever happens to be your objective. Yeah. And the other thing too also is you want to make sure that you're ready for prime time. You know, so often companies they're still writing their business plan, and they're already wanting to talk about that to the world, and there's no proof points there. And savvy journalists, savvy tech journalists, savvy finance journalists, they will poke holes into that right away. And that's the worst thing